Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. My friends, the gun control lobby and its leaders, a la David Hogg and Democratic politicians, every town for gun safety, the sort of gun control industrial complex, the apparatus of all these institutions and people who are pushing for this stuff, there are so many problems with their claims, but chief among those problems, and one of the most oftentimes neglected problems by many pundits, is their distortion of moral terms. My friends, there's a lot of minutia in the gun debate. Sometimes the debate gets dragged down in discussing mental health. Sometimes the debate gets dragged down in discussing the designations of certain weapons. Is it an assault weapon? Is it not an assault weapon? Sometimes the debate gets bogged down in the ineffectual nature of gun laws. Sometimes the debate gets bogged down in mental health crisis. And sometimes the debate gets bogged down into vague associations between guns and violence, even though those associations are pretty weak when you take them beyond their face value or their apparent face value. And all this minutia distracts us from what actually matters. The gun debate is not a matter of statistics or personal conditions of human beings. The gun debate is primarily a battle of moral terms. It is of great ethical significance. It was the great Albert J. Nock who said in his essay, Our Enemy the State, that the student of history is not concerned with the minutia of the day, but rather he is concerned with the underlying principles that animate any given issue. And that's what I want to focus on today. So my friends, I have been seeing the sentiments of so many different gun control advocates, and I have thought to myself, are there any fundamental ethical theories that underlie their beliefs? And after searching through my study, after looking through my glossaries and trying to understand if there's any other established ethical systems that would endorse their beliefs, I found out something, my friends. The sentiments of gun control advocates suffer from primitivism. They are morally primitive. What do I mean? I mean that they are primitive in the sense that almost all of the claims, the mainstream claims made by gun control advocates, substitute rational inquiry, i.e., the pursuit of truth, against the backdrop of an objective reality for platitudes and subjectivism. Very interesting, isn't it? I'll give you a few examples. David Hogg, who's one of the thought leaders, if you can even call him that, of the gun control movement, made this tweet. He said, "How many more people until we put our politics aside and focus on what we can agree on and act instead of simply and debating these things and acting like they're not going to continue? So instead of debating, we should just act," according to David Hogg. Now, the question becomes this: how do you act without an intelligible guide? Behind every action is a principle, and debate is meant to shine the light of illumination and reason upon that principle and bring it out for our consideration. Again, Hogg is suffering from a condition that so many people are suffering from, the inability to recognize the importance of first principles to any given concept. It was the great Sir James Mackintosh, one of the natural law philosophers of the French Revolution era, who was in England, who said that if you believe justice, for example, is simply about utility, it's simply about expediency, it's simply about being able to do something that might be good in the short term, you're actually missing what the idea of justice is. And just like those who claim that justice is simply utility, Hogg suffers from the same condition. He's claiming that this debate is simply about acting. There's a principle that animates every action, and is the principle just or not? That's the question the philosopher has to ask. Hogg doesn't want to do that. We have more examples. Maxwell Alexander Frost, he said this tweet: "There is about 1.5 gallons of blood in the human body. Today we rallied in front of the 15 5-gallon jugs filled with red liquid to represent the lives taken at Pulse. At Marco Rubio, please make a deal to save lives. We need action now. We can't wait until the next shooting." So they essentially use jugs of human blood to exemplify the fates of the deceased. This is supposed to create an emotional reaction. We'll get to that in a second. Hogg also made another comment. He said, "If you are a non-American, please contact your government and ask them to do so and put out a travel advisory discouraging people from coming to the United States until we act on gun safety." So he wants embassies to tell people to not go to the United States no matter where in the United States, because apparently the entire country, according to Hogg, is plagued by gun violence, which is not true, by the way. Some areas are different than others. Then we have Senator Chris Murphy, who in a famous speech said, "Why do you spend all this time running for the United States Senate if your answer is, as the slaughter increases, as our kids run for their lives, we do nothing?" So apparently the only kind of acceptable action is legislative action. We're building up something here, my friends. Stay with me. Then we have Lori Lightfoot, mayor of Chicago, suffering from some of the harshest gun violence rates, says, "As a nation, we simply cannot allow this gun violence to continue. Every single day, children and young people are losing their lives to people who do not value the sanctity of life and take advantage of the unabated presence of firearms in our communities." And then we have here Representative Mondaire Jones telling us what he's going to do to fix the issue.
You will not stop us from advancing the Protecting Our Kids Act today. You will not stop us from passing it in the House next week, and you will not stop us there. If the filibuster obstructs us, we will abolish it. If the Supreme Court objects, we will expand it, and we will not rest until we have taken weapons of war out of circulation in our communities. Each and every day, we will do whatever it takes to end gun violence, whatever it takes. What we will do is not fail the children of this country the way that you have failed us.
So the Constitution, our institutions, the Supreme Court filibuster, all of it will be simply silly putty in the hands of this representative so he can get his agenda. My friends, there's a fundamental issue here, and it's not the minutia. It's not really even about the guns. It's about how we view issues. It's about how we view moral issues. And the problem is, gun control advocates do not view this, per se, as correctly as an ethical issue. They view this as a moral issue from the point of outrage. So we have to now ask ourselves, if they're viewing a moral issue wrong, what is the correct way to view a moral issue? Well, my friends, there are two distinct hallmarks of good and sound moral thinking: the use of reason against the backdrop of the objective reality. So to have a good moral thinking, you must A, use reason, but you also must have something to apply your reason to, and that is the laws of reality, which give us our moral propositions. Now, it was the great Lord Keynes who said, Henry Home, who was a mentor to David Hume, who in philosophy created the is-ought problem, and who also inspired Thomas Jefferson, who penned our great Declaration. He inspired Jefferson's moral thinking. Keynes said that reason alone is not enough for moral thinking. You have to have data. And when he said data, he simply meant you have to have an observation of something that is beyond yourself. Because moral reasoning does not simply begin and end with you. It begins and it ends with whatever is out there, whatever we can see and observe and process with our reason. So let me use an analogy to exemplify this point. Let's say you have a cake and you have all the ingredients for the cake. You have sugar, butter, all that good stuff. That those ingredients are necessary for you to make the cake. But unless you have a blender or some kind of other apparatus that can be used to mold the cake into its correct form so it can then be put in the oven and baked, you will not have the ability to complete the cake. Reason is like the blender or the molder that allows us to mold the cake, but observation and looking at the world of objective morality is the ingredients, the stuff that we need to have the cake in the first place. What's the problem here? The problem is that these gun control advocates are using what I have called in my videos, and I'll call it again, proximity ethics. They're using a closeness to certain kinds of ideas and concepts which evoke outrage, which evoke moral disgust as a substitute for sound moral thinking. So we have two different context here. The person, I'll call them person A, that wants to endorse sound moral thinking. Again, he uses reason, and he also understands the laws of reality are resolute, and it is for the moral person to conform our actions to the laws of reality, not to make the laws of reality our own in our own head. So we have that person, but then we have the person who doesn't view morality as a matter of objective laws or processes, but simply doesn't even view morality in any defined way at all. They view morality solely through the lens of outrage. There are people in academia who do this, like Peter Singer, right? Peter Singer is a famous Australian philosopher who is big on animal rights, and his primary method of teaching and advocating is outrage. It's how can we let this happen? Or you have an obligation to give your money to other people if you can do so, without actually justifying why. So in these two different contexts, you have two different outcomes. The person who bases their moral thinking and reasoning in the objective and uses reason to process the objective will have conclusions that stand independent of themselves. The person, however, and these are the gun control people over here, that base their moral thinking in outrage can then bend their policy prescriptions and the outcome of those prescriptions into this universe of outrage. So they have no need to justify their positions beyond merely being outraged and merely being overran by emotional subjectivism. This is the problem. It's not that the gun lobby gets the facts wrong. They do. It's that the gun lobby does not exist. Their rhetoric does not exist in a world where the facts even matter. And not just the facts of what a gun is or how many mass shootings there are or how much gun violence is in America. No, the facts that allow us to even have that conversation in the first place. The facts of moral thinking. This is fundamentally not simply an emotion problem. This is a problem of knowledge. This is a problem of what we as human beings are willing to accept as true in light of our own biases. Many people simply say that the gun lobby is devoid of facts, but that is only half true. A lot of their claims are devoid of facts, but they're also devoid of what we would call in philosophy strong epistemic grounding. That is, grounding in a strong basis for knowledge. You have these two different universes. Now, back to proximity ethics. When you exist in a universe where outrage guides your moral thinking, imagine your moral thinking as a sort of planet orbiting around the mass of outrage. When you exist in that universe, my friends, you can make almost anything make sense. And you can use tools like proximity ethics to induce agreement for other people. So, for example, one of the cases of proximity ethics that have been used by gun control advocates is saying, imagine if your kids were shot up. Now, my friends, none of us want our kids, I don't have kids, but no good parent wants their kids to die. And so that may be the urge that moves them towards agreeing with policies that in any other context they may have forcefully rejected, because now they have personalized the matter. And that proximity ethics says that we can assign good or bad, we can assign a value judgment about something on the basis of what it's close to. And since in the case of Uvalde, we're getting somewhere right now, guys, we're getting somewhere. In the case of Uvalde, the shooter killed kids, we can therefore assign all of our policy arguments with the argument, think of the children, rather than actually looking at the arguments on their merits, because the proximity of that is that it's close to kids, it's close to the grave of kids. The jugs of blood for the Pulse shooting evokes a visceral reaction within us, which makes us make decisions on the basis of seeing those jugs and not on the merits of any argument that gun control advocates are actually looking at. In almost every case, my friends, the gun control advocates rely on a rejection of sound moral thinking to make morally absurd terms. Whether that's the congressman, whether that's a mayor, whether that's David Hogg, whether that's Kamala Harris, whether that's Joe Biden, in almost every single case, whenever they're arguing for gun control, there is one thing that is true. They don't have the temerity to actually engage with issues in a multidimensional fashion. So many people, my friends, have one method of analysis. They will say, well, from a firearms technician standpoint, this is bad, or from a doctor standpoint, this is bad, or from a psychological standpoint, this is bad. Yet, they reject the wholeness and fullness of reality and the richness and potential of their capacity to reason and deal with things as human beings by not looking at things through as many lenses and vectors as we can. And of course, it's impossible to do so in the presence of mediocre moral thinking. So when we have rejected the proper foundation and terms for this debate, which is a moral debate, a debate about ethics, Because ultimately, gun ownership flows from the natural right to preserve yourself, which is a fundamentally ethical issue of ethics, which has been expounded upon by philosophers like John Locke, and before him, Combes and Grotius and all those other people, and before them, Suarez, all those other people. So when you reject the proper foundations for a debate, and you put the debate in your own rhetorical terms, what happens? Not only do you get the secondary facts wrong, you get the facts of what a gun is, what an assault weapon is wrong, you get the facts of shooting is wrong, you get all those facts wrong, but you fundamentally miss the underlying principle. And ignorance of first principles is a certain kind of death that I would not wish upon any of my enemies. It is a death of intelligence. It is a death of the ability to engage truthfully with issues. And for so long, our political discourse has accepted this kind of death as necessary and as intuitive. But my friends, intuition is only the beginning of knowledge. Do not stay with intuition. There are so many more directions I want to go in, my friends. There are so many ethical theories behind this, metaethical theories, right? But I don't have time, but I'll leave you with this, my friends. Whatever you do, always look for the undercurrents of the stream. If you look at a stream or a wave and simply say, that's a pretty wave, you may be right, but you fundamentally misunderstand the wave or the stream that is rushing through the waters. Look at the undercurrents of this debate if you really want to be able to suss out the nonsense being put out by some people and to embrace the tradition of epistemic righteousness that this country is based upon, that America was forged from. Think on it. My friends, I love you guys so much. If you love me, please be sure to go to my Patreon, patreon.com/PhilCWatson, or PayPal, officialcwatson@gmail.com. Join my locals, which is going to be christianwatson.locals.com, or my Discord, which is in the comment section down below. Please be sure to like this video, so share this video, subscribe to this channel. Be sure to comment on this video as well. My friends, I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.